What is up, everybody? Welcome into the Fantasy Tap. It is week two, I guess. Waiver editions. Oh my goodness. Week one, football's back. Week two, now we tilt, right, John?
You were already tilting in some situations. It was an interesting week one. We saw a lot of interesting things happening amongst teams, a lot of players coming out of nowhere and making big plays, big days, and a lot of them ending up on these waiver wires. A lot of these players went undrafted.
Yep, 100%. I mean, we saw a lot of surprises, definitely. But I tweeted it out earlier on our Twitter. My emotions are like a seesaw right now. I tell myself, I'm tilting. And then I say, no, Michael, don't tilt yet. So then there is no reason to tilt. There's a reason we drafted everybody we did. So let's let that play out. But tomorrow we have our tilt or not to tilt episode, which will be a fun episode. But before we jump into our waiver wire additions for week two, make sure to subscribe to this podcast on YouTube. Or wherever you listen to podcasts, if you're listening to us now. Also, make sure if you're watching on YouTube to please smash the like button. We'd really, really appreciate it. It helps us out and gets us more views and more listeners so we can put out more content. But John, you have something to say?
There is this ongoing theory. If you hit the like button like 2 or 3 times, $1 will come to you. So hit it a couple times. Make sure that you try it out.
I've also heard if you subscribe and if you like the videos, if you do both, you win your fantasy matchup each week.
That's if you listen.
That's what I've heard. So, but also don't forget, join our Discord. That is in the link in the description. A lot of cool people in there talk about fantasy football all day, every day. So, but John, let's get into it. Let's jump into our quarterbacks. We've got our top 5 quarterbacks, or top 5, our 4 quarterbacks that we have listed as waiver wire targets: Jared Goff, Teddy Bridgewater, Jameis Winston, and Justin Fields. It's crazy because out of those 4, 3 of them are starting quarterbacks, but the one who is not a starting quarterback is the most owned, and that is Justin Fields at 48.9%. What the heck am I saying? He went 2 for 2 in rushes. 2 for 2, 10 yards passing, and then a rushing touchdown. He scored more fantasy points than Aaron Rodgers this week.
Blow.
Yeah, I know.
That is low.
It is.
No, the reason you're going to want to be looking at Justin Fields right now is Andy Dalton, obviously playing against the Rams defense, didn't look amazing. And we all know it's a matter of time before Justin Fields does take over. And if he's floating around your waivers, it's someone you're definitely going to be wanting to add to your team before news of him starting comes out, because you're going to end up spending up on him if you're not already this week. Mm-hmm. I do think that he's a great quarterback. So if you drafted someone later that isn't turning out to be that solid player like we expected, slate this guy in on your bench until he blows up, and then see which of the better 2 you got.
Yeah, I agree there. Definitely somebody to have more of a long-term play. But maybe you have, maybe you have Teddy Bridgewater, who's another guy on our list. But he's only owned in 4.7% of leagues. Went 28 for 36 or 28 of 36, 264 yards and 2 touchdowns. Had a very good day. He did lose Jerry Jeudy for a while. He is said to be out 4 to 6 weeks, which stinks. I like Teddy B. If you're quarterback needy in our Superflex league, I'm not really going to be lunging for him. He was playing a defense that I will just say did not live up to the expectations that I put out there for him. So I mean, I think he's a good add in a Superflex league, 2 quarterback league if he's there. But if you're in a single quarterback league, in my opinion, I don't think I'm really shooting for Teddy right off rip, unless you're really, really quarterback needy.
Yeah, he's obviously someone who's coming off as a streaming quarterback. So against the Giants defense, it gives him a lot of reasonable expectation to have a good game. Now, their secondary was pretty solid, but I don't think he's someone you're going to be grabbing to replace anyone you probably drafted. But I do think that if you're in a league where you're Jameis Winston and Justin Fields aren't available, that he's someone that you can hold on to should your quarterback go down. He's a rosterable quarterback at this second.
Yeah. And then Jared Goff, 5.6% owned, 338 yards, went 38 of 57 for 3 touchdowns and 1 interception. He's going to be fantasy relevant throughout the year, and that's mainly because of 1, garbage time, which we saw this game, and 2, his running backs. His running backs are very capable pass catchers and have big playability. So I mean that definitely gives him a boost. I would rank him just above Teddy Bridgewater. I don't think he's going to be consistent throughout the season, but he is going to get those garbage time points. So another guy I think in a Superflex league, something like that, you could take a shot on, throw him in there if he's not already gone. But single quarterback leagues, like I said, I think it's going to be difficult to predict when he's going to go off, when he's actually going to make the best of that garbage time he has.
Yeah, absolutely. The only time he's going to be fantasy relevant is in garbage time. Even against the best defenses or the worst defenses, you're more than likely going to be less likely to play him because there's going to be less room for that garbage time. And this weekend we saw he didn't even start becoming fantasy relevant until the 4th quarter.
Yeah. And then saving the best quarterback for last, Jameis Winston, at least in my opinion, 26.1% owned, went 14 of 20 for 148 yards, but 5 touchdowns. 5 touchdowns. That's amazing. He also had 6 carries for 37 yards, a little bit of rushing there. I think he is definitely the quarterback pickup of the week. A comfortable fab budget, depending single quarterback league. I'd spend about 10% of my budget, 10 to 11% of my budget to pick him up, because I do think he's going to be a good asset, good fantasy asset week in and week out. He went up against a good team and showed that he can prove it, or can play well. So I love Jameis Winston.
Yeah, and obviously with their best running back being Alvin Kamara, who's such an amazing pass catching back, it adds so much. I mean, one of the touchdowns this week was just a touch pass in the backfield that went for 3 yards, ended up in the end zone.
Yeah,
beautiful game from him. Very excited for him to be here this year. I'm actually spending, in a situation where you're desperate for a quarterback and he's on the waivers, I'd be comfortable spending like up to 25% of my budget.
Yeah.
If I was able to lock him in for the rest of the season in a redraft league, he's someone I would spend up on, especially because these big quarterbacks that have these huge upsides that are starting to show up, they're going to be expensive and everyone's going to be grabbing them. So that bid's going to be competitive.
Now, question real quick before we move on to our running backs. Jameis Winston, he's quarterback 2 currently on the week. We are doing this before the Monday night game. So Lamar Jackson could ball out. But he's currently quarterback 2. It's okay, Derek Carr, but whatever. Is he going to finish as a quarterback 1 on this year?
It's likely. I think it's very possible, especially with this great start. I wouldn't guarantee it, but I went from, hey, it's possible to it's likely after week 1. So another show out like this in week 2 or week 3 is more than likely going to be a definite. Okay. I mean, right. I said to some people today, I think he's probably the most likely to break the touchdown record this year.
Wow.
Just with the fact that he likes to take it deep, he's going to be getting those touchdowns from Kamara. It's after this week 1, I feel a lot more comfortable saying it out loud.
Yeah, and he gets Michael Thomas back later on in the season, which is nice.
Absolutely.
Running backs. Let's start with a single team because obviously Raheem Mostert out for 8 weeks. Went to IR. Ow, I just bit my tongue. Out on IR. 8 weeks. Chipped cartilage in his knee. Listen, you've got obviously Eli Elijah Mitchell. Eli Mitchell played very well this week. Showed out really. Went 19 rushes for 104 yards and a rushing touchdown. He is currently running back 10 on the week. Then you've got Trey Sermon there, who is inactive. He's owned in 74.5% of leagues. Elijah Mitchell is only owned in 1.9%, by the way. And then Jermichael Hasty owned in 0.4% of leagues. He had one rush, one catch for 15 yards. Nothing crazy. Obviously, Elijah Mitchell is going to be the story of the week, finishing where he did in Raheem's place. The reason why we bring Trey Sermon up at being owned so much, I think with him being active, and maybe I'm wrong, but I do think there are going to be leagues out there where Trey Sermon gets dropped, because people might read too much into the fact that he was inactive, a healthy scratch this week. If he does scoop him up, I think it's going to be, in my opinion, it's going to be a running back by committee. We've seen it year in and year out with Shanahan. And while I do think Elijah Mitchell is the pickup of the week, I'd feel very comfortable spending 25-30% of my budget on him.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
I mean, just because of his situation. But I do think that it could become one of those, headaches where 1 week it's Elijah Mitchell, the next week it's Michael Hasty, the next week it's Trey Sermon. But in my opinion, I do think it's going to be Elijah Mitchell and Trey Sermon really getting the bulk of the work, with your Michael Hasty working.
Yeah, I think it's definitely gonna be Trey Sermon as the lead back there, like you've been saying, and everyone's been saying throughout camp. Trey's been looking like the best running back there. No one knows, as of the best of my ability, of why Trey Sermon was held out of this healthy scratch. Maybe they just thought they didn't need him. No reason to put him out there. They weren't going to use him, keep him healthy because their team just gets so banged up. Do you have an answer for me?
Well, so from what I've read, there's rumor that, and this is just a rumor, nobody's confirmed it. It was due to curfew. Also, there is, I supposedly, after reading some of the beat writers and things like that, Elijah jumped Trey Sermon in the last like 10 days or so, or last like week and a half or so of camp. So those are some rumors as well. Nothing, definite, but that is what's kind of swirling out there. So, I mean, like I said, I think that it's going to be Trey and Elijah going forward.
Yeah,
but
I think they're going to be the the primary backs there. As far as spending a big amount on them, I don't think I'd spend up heavily on Elijah Mitchell at all. Mainly on the fact that, like you're saying, it's going to be a committee backfield. You're not going to be able to predict the weeks, and there's a possibility that Trey comes in there and takes over a heavy timeshare, or that Elijah gets, not a lot of it once they got the rest of the guys in there. I'd be willing to buy him though if he's sitting there floating around on the waivers, but I'm only spending like 15% at most. It's a long year, and those running backs are incredibly infamous for injuries.
yeah,
Not them individually, but just that team's running back situation.
Just that team in general. As far as JaMychal Hasty, I think you can get him pretty cheap this week, to be honest. And this is a week to get him. Maybe up to 4 to 5% of your budget, just to have one of those running backs, because we all know one reason why Trey Sermon jumped the way he did in ADP is because that team is a run heavy team. So
now there's some other guys that are going off these waivers as well. You've got guys like Mark Ingram, who rushed for 85 yards on 26 carries, got himself a touchdown, actually took the first touch out of Houston last week, only owned in 11%. We've got James White, 4 carries for 12 yards, 7 passing attempts towards his way, caught 6 of them for 50 yards, was used pretty heavily and owned just under 50%. Are you taking Elijah Mitchell over both of them? Absolutely, no questions asked.
yes, yeah, like I said, Elijah Mitchell's my pickup of the week.
Okay, that's fair. And then just before we leave these guys behind, what kind of budget are you spending on White or Ingram, if you are?
White, I think because both Ramondre and Damian Harris both fumbled yesterday, they could both be in the doghouse, and that could we kind of see more work for James White. I'd be willing to spend, 5-6% on James White. Mark Ingram, though, I would be willing to pay, 8 to 11% in that range, 9 to 11% for him, because I think he's going to be that lead back. He out-touched everybody, by far. So I do like Mark Ingram. How about you?
I'm still hesitant to be touching any of those running backs there. David Johnson came in, got a handful of work as well, especially in the pass catching game. So as great as they played last week, it was against the Jaguars, and I'm not going to be relying on any of them. I don't think I'll ever be in the mindset to where I'm throwing them in the lineup. If I ended up spending fab on them, they'd probably just ride my bench.
Yeah, and that's another thing, guys. You got to remember, we're not dropping obvious starters for these guys. We're dropping guys who didn't see any touches. Or guys that weren't really highly drafted. Russell Gage
if you've been holding on to J.K. Dobbins.
Yeah, something like that. Maybe somebody got hurt. Maybe you were the Raheem Mostert owner. Things like that. Those are the situations we're picking these guys up. We're not dropping starters. We're not dropping even, potential starters. Like I said, there's no reason to tilt so yet because, we drafted the guys where we did. And then one guy I wanted to bring up real quick before we move on to the wide receivers, Larry Roundtree, owned in 0.8%, went 8 for 27. Now, I'm not bringing him up because he had a good week. I'm trying to stay ahead of the curve. Austin Eckler was already dealing with the hamstring issue going into the game. Played well, did decent, got in the end zone. But this is more of a precaution. The one reason why I'm bringing him up is because I think we saw that he's going to be that second guy behind Eckler. So with Eckler's injury history and things like that, I kind of want to be ahead of the game. Where I have to spend like the least amount of fab before, God forbid something does happen to Eckler. Maybe he misses a couple games. Larry Roundtree could jump into a nice spot. So that's why I bring him up.
I wasn't going to bring this guy up, but Kenneth Gainwell actually looked very heavily used for such a guy out of nowhere this week. He's only got one touchdown on his score sheet right now. But he actually had another one that was called back that looked absolutely beautiful in the pass catching game.
Mm-hmm.
He seemed to have been getting just enough work. And if Miles Sanders takes any fall off or Kenneth starts taking over any part of that running back room, I think that he's someone that's going to be someone you want to pick up now rather than later if you've got room on your bench.
Definitely. I agree with you there. Love that. You want to stay ahead of the game. So I love that.
Yeah, he's owned in 3.5% of rosters currently.
Perfect. Let's move over to the wide receivers. We'll talk about the Patriots wide receivers. Obviously, Mac Jones looked good. Jacoby Myers owning 61.5% of leagues, and Nelson Aguilar owning 29.8. Aguilar had the better day of the two fantasy wise, but Jacoby Myers did lead the team in targets, and he is not owned in about 40% of leagues. So I like both of these guys. I think they have a nice matchup this week against the Jets. And I like the fact that them and Mac Jones had a pretty nice connection. Right off the bat, it's only going to get better. So I like both of these guys. If I had to favor one, only because of the targets as of now, and the fact that Jacoby Myers played all but one offensive down. I like Jacoby the most, but I'd be willing to take a shot on Aguilar too.
I'm not really excited about either of these guys. In my opinion, we saw the Patriots mainly prioritize throwing the ball around and spreading it around. Everyone was getting involved throughout the game. I think they both will have a role, but I do think that Aguilar showed to be the bigger downfield threat, the bigger big play guy. And if I had to take a shot on someone, being that Jacoby Myers, 9 targets in a game, super solid, but 44 yards, you're only getting at most 10 points in a full point PPR league where you're begging for a touchdown at that point. And at that point, I'd rather take Aguilar if I'm begging for a touchdown after him looking like a completely different person ever since he got to Las Vegas last year. And then so far in New England, he's looking a lot better than he ever did for the Eagles.
Yeah, that is true. And then Zach Pasquel, this guy's probably, actually not probably, he is my pickup of the week as far as, as far as wide receivers go. Had 5 targets headed his way, got in the end zone twice, and he caught 4 balls, 43 yards. I know it's not a ton, but in that offense where we really thought that, Pittman was going to take over. He didn't. He led the wide receivers. Pasquel did in targets. He had glimpses last year. He's had glimpses throughout his career. He ended the season off strong, but I think with the new quarterback, kind of seems like they have a little bit of a connection. It's not an easy matchup this coming week for the Rams, but he is somebody I like going forward. So I mean, I would be, being that it's wide receiver position, I don't think unless you're in a three wide receiver league or even a, you're not spending a ton of fab on these guys. But 8-10% somewhere around there, you could throw on these guys just for the potential upside he has.
Yeah, I think so. I'd roster him if he's going available cheap in your leagues. I wouldn't want to spend a lot of fab on him because I think that offense looks like a team that could be spreading the ball out every week depending on where the coverage is, and I don't think there's any true favorite yet. So I wouldn't feel comfortable lining him up next week. But if he repeats this week and has another high touchdown, touchdown next week, plus a handful of targets and leads the team again, then he definitely turns into someone that I'm looking to flex in fairly often. So again, ahead of the curve, but I'm not sure I want to be slating him in next week right away.
Right, definitely. Sterling Shepard, somebody had a really solid game. 25.3% owned, went 7 on 9 targets for 113 yards and a touchdown. Probably the only good thing that came from this game for the Giants. Sterling Shepard led the entire team in targets and catches. Is he going to be a thing?
There was if you ask a lot of Giants fans coming into the season, even with the addition of Golladay and Kadarius Toney, they were still shouting that Sterling Shepard's going to have a huge impact. And I think it's very true. It lines up really nicely. He's been a very good number 2 receiver on that team his entire time he's been there. He's never had a chance to be a true solid number 1. And I personally don't think he's been able to live up to that, even if he had that opportunity. But I think there's a big chance he's my pickup of the week. I'd rather pick him up this week than Pasquel. But I think that there's reason to expect that it's not going to be someone that's going to be very relevant this year, because a lot of those points came in the garbage time when Jones was just trying to finish the game off with some decent stats. So I don't think it's something you're going to be wanting to expect.
Yeah, no, I agree. I don't think it's going to be a consistent thing. MVS, Marquez Valdes-Scantling, owning 4% of leagues, had 8 targets. Another guy had a really solid, showing, even though his team kind of didn't do so hot. Or not solid showing. He had a solid target share. Sorry, not a solid showing. I like that, being the fact that that Randall Cobb was traded for and really wasn't on the field too much. I mean, the entire Green Bay offense did not look like the Green Bay offense. But MVS is somebody I just wanted to bring up because, he could be taking over that second wide receiver role there. And I don't think it's time to hit the panic button just yet in Green Bay. So I do think there's going to be weeks of usability for him. But being that, Randall Cobb is there who might get associated to the offense, I wouldn't spend any more than 5%, and preferably a little less than that on MVS, but definitely somebody it's a high powered offense on a bad week, somebody you could probably get for relatively cheap because people don't really look at those targets. They look at fantasy points when adding their waiver wire people targets.
Yeah. And then, I can agree with him if you're in a deeper league. I think he could be someone that could have some usable games, especially if you're in a multiple wide receiver league or anything like that. Allen Lazard personally looked pretty solid. 2 of the passes aren't showing up on his score sheet because they were actually called in. They were actually flags based off of other defensive players holding in the middle of the field that weren't covering him, but the ball still went his way. It just ended up uncatchable. I think he showed some really good deep ball skills. I don't know what his current own percentage is. I wouldn't be picking him up, but if you can grab Scantling and throw him into your bench for a week and see what happens there, it could be worth it. he's definitely got some opportunity there. And
Yeah.
if anything, there shouldn't be much competition in that bidding.
And then the Denver Broncos wide receivers, Tim Patrick and KJ Hamler. Tim Patrick's owned in 0.6%. KJ is owned in 1.8. Obviously, Jerry Jeudy's going down. Tim Patrick did have a touchdown. Both of them had 4 targets. And KJ Hamler did drop a wide open touchdown as well, or would be touchdown. And it would have been a long one. I think it would have been about 50 yards, if I'm not mistaken. So that definitely would have added him to, his fantasy day. I think somebody's going to step up, be that number 2 for that team. Wide receiver wise, obviously Fant is there. And if I had to guess, I know Tim Patrick had the touchdown, but I think KJ Hamler is the guy who's going to step up. I think we see a little more consistency out of him, and potentially steps into a nice little role. He is a big play guy too, and I like having that on my bench, or on my team.
I'm going to actually have to disagree with you on that one. I think that Tim Patrick's already shown, especially back in 2020, that he can be that team's number 2 receiver very, very well. Cortland Sutton out majority of last season. He stepped up, was getting touchdowns multiple back-to-back weeks. And even this way, he was still getting those targets. He may not be the big play guy, and you're right. KJ will get those huge plays a couple times a year, but I think that we're going to see Tim Patrick be a lot more consistent and take over Jerry Jeudy's role rather than finding his own. And as far as adding a completely different role to the field like KJ, I do think he'll still have his usability though.
Yep. And then the last 3 guys all are owned in under 2% of leagues: Van Jefferson, KJ Osborne, and Quintez Cephas. If you had to rank these guys, how would you rank them?
I actually would. It's sad. I would actually go Quintez, KJ, and then what was the third one?
Van.
I would actually go Quintez Cephas, KJ Osborne, then Van Jefferson. Actually, Van Jefferson, then KJ Osborne. And I hate to say that. I saw KJ Osborne's stat line today. I didn't watch a lot of the Vikings game, but 9 targets on 7 catches for 76 yards. You throw a touchdown in there, he outscored Justin Jefferson. He got a lot of work. He looked really good too. Problem is, Quintez Cephas showed up when Tyrod Williams went down. Seemed to look like the team's number 1 receiver at that point. Not my boy Amon-Ra, which scares me. So if I had to put someone in next week, I would more comfortably put Quintez in. If I had to roster someone just for see what happens later, it more than likely would be KJ Osborne. I'm curious on what that guy does. I think he's 1 injury away from being a huge fantasy impact.
Yeah, I feel like an idiot. I dropped him in a dynasty league because I needed to drop 1 player, and I'm an idiot. I feel stupid. So
I'd be lying if I said I didn't do it. I dropped him.
Oh, you did?
Yep, for Ishmael, whatever his name is. I can't remember his name. They're rookie.
Yeah. Yeah. So you said Quintez KJ Van, or Quintez Van KJ?
Quintez Van KJ. If I had to do next week, if it was just for a season long pick up and hold, it'd probably be KJ Van Quintez.
Okay. Yeah, I think I am there with you. Either way, the first one, Quintez Van KJ. I like KJ Van's offense. Obviously, Matt Stafford there. Quintez Cephas, like you said, I do think he jumps into that number 1 receiver role. He showed flashes throughout preseason, and even last year a little bit. And then KJ, obviously Justin Jefferson did not have the day, so I think that he'll be fine down the road, and he'll take over those targets. But I agree with you. Even season long, I mean, I think KJ, it's a nice showing for him, but I don't think it's going to be consistent. And if it is, I'm going to kick myself for dropping him. So
he'd be a low end play if you ever had to play him at this point, but he is someone that I'm interested in just to watch and pay attention to. Yeah. You want to do the tight ends?
Yeah, let's jump into the tight ends. We only have 2 today. Juwan Johnson for the Saints. 3 for 3, 26 yards, and 3 touchdowns. Son.
I'm sorry, it's 2 touchdowns.
I'm sorry, 2 touchdowns. 2 touchdowns, son. He is listed as a tight end and a wide receiver. So on all platforms. So the majority of platforms, at least. So flex him into that tight end spot. I like those. It wasn't a ton, but obviously red zone guy. Nice red zone target there for Jameis. Definitely worth picking up. Adam Troutman did lead the tight ends though in targets. He had 6. So I still like Adam on the season, but I think Juwan Johnson's, a nice stash just in case. Because obviously with Michael Thomas out, they have to throw the ball to somebody. And Marquez Callaway was not that guy.
He was not. That long pass to Damian Harris made me kick myself a little bit, but then that's pretty much all he got. They weren't moving the ball around a lot through the air. The 5 touchdowns might be a little worrisome because he only had 20 attempts.
Right.
So
I mean, definitely, it's very, very high, touchdown percentage.
And a lot of that's coming because of my guy Alvin Kamara. Just those little.
Right.
He's balling.
And then Pharaoh Brown, not owned in any leagues, had 5 targets, 4 receptions, 67 yards. Tyrod Taylor played very well. Not someone I'm running to the waivers to pick up. I think the ball is going to be spread out in this offense. As far as receivers go, I do think Nico Collins shows up at some point through the season. Also, Danny Amendola obviously was there. Chris Conley had a little part in the game as well. And Jordan Akins is still there. Plus they have the rookie Brevin Jordan too, who did not play. He was a healthy scratch, I believe. Yeah. I'm not somebody I'm jumping to the waivers, but if you're tight end needy, maybe you can hold him on the bench.
Yeah, he's someone that, again, trying to stay ahead of the curve. You're not picking him up this week. You're staying ahead of the curve right now is just watching to see what he does next week. And then if he's someone that gets a lot of targets again in that matchup, then now you're looking to maybe bench him and roster him and hold on to him. And then if you're looking at consistent 10-point weeks, he's could be vying for a tight end spot on your roster at that point. It's going to be a wait and see.
Yeah. So anyways, guys, those are the guys we wanted to talk to you about in regards to the waiver wire additions this week, week 2. I am so stoked because, like I said, we are recording before the Monday game because we want to get this out to you. Obviously, maybe Brian Edwards shows up on this list if he has a nice target share. Maybe
Sammy Watkins.
Yeah, maybe Sammy Watkins, somebody like that. Let's see what their target share is. And what they do with it. So anyways, guys, enjoy that Peyton and Eli Monday night commentary. I'm very excited for that. So thanks so much for tuning in, guys. Don't forget, subscribe, comment. Let us know if you agree, disagree with any of these, or maybe somebody we missed. Let us know in the comments. We'd really, really appreciate that. John, you got anything to say to him before we go?
Yeah, just reminding you guys, let us know in the comments any of the waiver wire ads we might have missed. If they're good, we can throw them on our Twitter, remind all the other guys out there that we need to get them too. And speaking of Twitter really quickly, make sure you guys are following us at the Fantasy Tap on both Instagram and Twitter. And then check out that Discord link one more time. Help you guys get those start sits involved, get those trades going, get all the advice you need. Thank you so much for joining us.
All right, guys, we'll see you next time for Tilt or Not to Tilt. Love you guys.
That's just the question.